Yeah, and I think this goes into a conversation about the entire North American League of Legends scene, which I referred to this interview that Travis did with the new heads of the Americas region.
By the way, one thing I did love about this interview, because essentially you have to understand the actual material, it's like 40 minutes. If there's ever an interview desperately needed and too long didn't watch, it's this interview. Because it's just boring as fuck, and it is literally just corporate people just dancing around questions. Right? But the one thing I enjoyed, because obviously I know Travis and I have like a history with him, is I just enjoy that Travis can't help himself, Monty. He's one of those people who can't be anyone other than himself, right? Which is, as we always say, me and Richard, both his crime and his punishment, which is at the beginning of the interview, he even has the audacity to set up who the people are he's interviewing, but then it inserts sort of a veiled bitch that he didn't have who he clearly really wanted to interview, which was like, you know, the like head of esports or whatever or something like that. So, and then the Naz person, you know, the one that was going to be on that episode about the LCS walkout that got memory hold from the day. He clearly wanted those people, but didn't get them. So instead, these people were the only ones from Riot. But then he also explains that like he's totally happy to be interviewing them too. It's like, who ever did an interview like this for? Who would ever do an interview like, hey, here I am at the LCS. I've got Stixay here. Obviously wanted to talk to Doublelift. He's a much better and more famous player, but he isn't available. But still glad to have you here, Stixay. Anyway, how you doing? Like, you would never start the interview. So what I love is Travis can't help himself, boys. Like even he knows everyone's watching this like, who the fuck are they? Like nobody, even their own family members might not recognize these guys here. Does anyone know who these two people are? I don't know who they are, mate. I've never seen these people ever.
One of them was recently elevated from the Brazilian office to be head of League of Legends for all of the Americas. So this was a recent announcement that they made. So he's in charge of basically LLA, CB, LoL, and LCS together. So the LCS commissioner job, which is out there being hired for right now, I assume this guy would be that person's boss, basically. So they keep adding more layers between the commissioner and upper management, because now there's like John Needham, who's the CEO of Riot Esports, and then Naz, who's the head of League of Legends, and then they have regional heads of League of Legends. It's all getting very confusing. So the LCS commissioner, I think, is going to be like fifth maybe down on the totem pole in terms of the corporate structure, which obviously means you have no power. I mean, I've said many times this job of the LCS commissioner is a poison chalice by its very nature. You have a doomed product in a viewership death spiral. There's not really anything that you could do as commissioner in order to fix that problem. And also the people who are above you have a vested interest in you not being successful, because if you change things, all of the people who made decisions previously about the LCS, former commissioners, for example, who have been promoted within the company, look dumb because they made all of the bad decisions, such as trying to make it like a sports league, bad format decisions, et cetera, et cetera. So they don't actually want you to make
It's the part
changes.
I love. It's where it's not in any way run like an actual business, Monty. It's like, we need some real big changes here. Whoa. People in the past might look silly then. They're like,
yeah.
As though that would ever even be a consideration in a business. Like, you just do what makes sense now for the business. Like, who cares about the past? What?
Well, this is what happens when nobody ever leaves the company and they just get promoted internally, and they still have control over the product. So it's very telling, by the way, that they said at the end of this video that they are trying to change the commissioner's role. Because I think the commissioner actually just had no power previously. That's what I think happened, and really didn't have very much ownership over the entire league. So I think maybe they're trying to address this, but it is really hilarious how terrible the answers in this interview are. Some of my favorite highlights. I think Travis actually did ask some tougher questions within this interview, to his credit, including one which is basically like, LCS viewership is down significantly. What are you going to do in order to improve it? And this was my favorite answer, Thorin, because it either shows that they are just being willfully disingenuous, or they just don't understand League of Legends or any esport at all. This answer,
which, to be fair, is always the game with Riot. So it's like,
are you stupid, or Are you a liar?
And it's never the game. It is a scale scenario. It's like which one tips more is the real question.
So to paraphrase the answer, you'll love this. He says, well, we look at the LCK, and the LCK has more viewership outside of Korea than inside of Korea. Okay, so there's more non-Korean viewership. Of course, it's big in China, obviously, big in the West. So I would imagine that is a true statement, that even though by the way,
it's a small country, so it's even a good one he's picked.
The Korean viewership is very good, by the way, guys. Remember, Korea is a country around 50 million people, and sometimes like, you know, 1 million Korean people are watching the Korean broadcast. Okay, so it's like 2% of the country. It's crazy. It's crazy good viewership by percentage of population. And so he says, so more people non-Koreans are watching LCK. We want to get LCS to that place as a global product.
That's it. So here's the thing, Monty. You know what he's just described there? He's just described a literal cargo cult. So what he's saying is this, Monty. Oh, here on this like tropical island that's fairly remote from civilization, we'd like to be like the British Empire. So in lieu of having a shipbuilding facilities, we're going to use coconuts and make ourselves a HMS destroyer. So we'll set and work on it right now. And, you know, when it's ready, then we'll sail to England and have an empire. Like, what are you talking about? Like what's mad about that, Monty, is he's really done the old meme. That's like that notepad of like step 1, LCK has enormous exogenous viewership. Step 2, we want LCS to be like LCK. Step 3, question mark, question mark, question mark. Step 4, all the viewers are watching the LCS now. And then he looks like, and then you go, but no, here's the genius. Travis goes, but what is step 3 though? That's a proprietary secret at this point.
No, here's the thing.
What I did is, does he have any idea? Is there any mechanism how they're going to do it, Monty?
You'll love this. So Travis didn't ask what is step 3, right? Of course.
no follow-up. Okay.
But it was just hilarious because I'm just sitting there and my jaw just hits the floor, and I'm thinking to myself, you don't even understand your own audience.
I mean, the weirdest part of what is, by definition, the people who watch LCK are the most hardcore viewer of competitive League of Legends, whereas actually the people who watch LCS, by definition, are almost the most casual. Like, I agree with him, Monty. He's not even understood, essentially, who these people are watch the game.
Well, it's also, the LCK has had a specific kind of vibe and way of doing things from the OGN days, right? It's had extreme continuity in the most famous player on earth and Faker, who has not only been part of the same team, he's been part of the league and the same team for the entirety of the last decade of his career, right? And we've seen that T1 matches obviously draw the most viewership. They've been able to very successfully build a fan base around Faker and around the brand. And so it has become an international draw. People became accustomed to watching Korean League of Legends. And even though LPL has on average had better teams over the last several years, the production value of LCK and kind of the feel of LCK the brand of LCK has really drawn people in and has, had them continue watching even when it's been very good, but perhaps not the best, right? But
I also think they've nailed even the narrative. Like, they didn't do it consciously, Monty, but the narratives for the LCK teams are way stronger than the LCS. LCS once upon a time had those brands, but people know from all the bitching about TSM and CLG the last few years, they don't have it. Like, think about this, Monty. Like, all the same narratives work, even if they're slightly crowbarred. Like, T1 is just always the Yankees of the fucking LCK. It's like they're always going to be like a powerhouse team, but if you don't like them, then you can slightly hate on them like Dom does. There's a whole grift there. They're not always going to win, but they should win. You have like fucking KT's always like, well, they like the Boston Red Sox in this case. They're supposed to be like the perennial rival, but they're never quite as good, and they've won the odd time. But if you're a fan of them, that's the like sort of outsider way to support a top team. Gen G basically is the replacement for like a Rocks Tigers or a Samsung in this point in time.
They're kind of like the Dodgers in baseball, right?
You've got these like really strong, distinct things, even beyond just the players. And what's weird actually about Korean League of Legends, I've always thought this with the Telecom Wars, is it's almost like it is wrestling, because even when the players are totally different, the narratives just somehow line up the same way. It's actually kind of almost uncanny in Korea, isn't it?
Yeah, and there are really great narratives in the LCK because many of these players have been there for years and years and years. You have so many former world champions. The viewership record was broken in this last playoffs again.
Oh, really?
And yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So it was not counting Chinese streams, but yeah,
was this like the upper bracket match of KT and SKT or something? What was it?
I think it was, yeah, because I think the finals was too short. I'll look that up. I'm not sure, but I know they hit new viewership, but it's like nobody's really tired of Gen G versus T1 because it just keeps. It's been the fourth final in a row that we've seen of this, and some people complain about it, but at the same time, it's created quite a bit of viewership as these rivals duel each other at the top every time. So. I think that there's a lot of reasons why people watch the LCK, and Riot will never acknowledge this, but part of that is the legacy of OGN. OGN created the way you do production around a final in particular, and this final was spectacular. I thought the production was extremely good on this final. I thought the hype video was really good, but it's the flow of the broadcast is OGN's flow. They haven't deviated from that. They hired a lot of the OGN producers to work on LCK. It's mostly it's a lot of the same people. And so there's a kind of feeling that you get, that I get while looking at it still, where it's a sense of familiarity and really love for the way that things are done over there, because they've successfully built a brand that I have a large, and many other people have a large degree of affinity with. And that just hasn't happened within LCS. LCS's product was always garbage. It was always garbage. It was too much like traditional sports, and they got away with it because they had all of these compelling players and teams, and people were really invested in the players and teams at the beginning. And so the drag that was created on the show by having a product that really wasn't very good wasn't noticeable. But once the popular players and teams kind of fade away and people no longer have those affinities, and you don't have TSM being as popular as good, and you don't have Bjergsen and people carrying the league, or the personalities like, I'm a Cutie Pie and Skara and, all the OG people, then you have to have a strong brand instead, which they've only started to build now. And I do give them credit for trying to shift the tone and the content of the league, which I think has been more successful, but it's probably too late, if we're being honest. Like, how do you pick up new viewers at this point in time? And there's so many problems, Thorin, with what they're saying, because it also doesn't help the teams. So it doesn't help the esports winter conditions, right? You first off, you just can't get a larger audience for LCS. Like, LCS is not going to be in a position where people want to watch it. Like, first off, it's a time zone issue a lot of the time for Europe and Asia being able to watch all of the games. They said that they did want to introduce more language coverage for LCS. But unless they're going to find some major influencers who want to do co-streams, I think that's not really going to help. Because at the end of the day, if you want to watch good Western League of Legends, you're going to watch LEC. Also, LEC's product is still better than LCS's. So there's not even, like, LCS isn't kicking their ass from an entertainment perspective outside of the game. LEC still dominates that, in my opinion. So you get a worse product, worse League of Legends. And if you're a hardcore fan, you can watch LPL or LCK. And how are you going to get a large Asian audience to watch LCS, and large Asian audiences are what power viewership in China and Korea. So how are you going to get Chinese and Korean people to care about this league? What do they care about? They care about nothing. There's no draw. There is no draw. You could add all the influencers in the world. You could add Disguised Toast, Ludwig. People in Korea and China don't even know who these people are. So there isn't a way to accomplish the goal of having exterior viewership. And Thorin, even if you did, so Arnold Herr came on the Monty and Wolf show and said that the Korean orgs,
from Gen G, if people
he's the CEO of Gen G, said the Korean orgs not doing so hot financially right now, right? And this is the case that they have all of this exterior viewership. Now, I don't know about the Chinese stream for LCK, but I can tell you right now that the global stream, the English stream, has 0 sponsors for the English audience. So they can have all of the fucking viewership in the world, and most of it can be coming from outside of Korea. But if that's true, they're not really monetizing the majority of their audience. They're not selling sponsors, as far as I can tell. Like, why don't they have sponsors? Remember that more people watch the English LCK channel than the LCS. So surely they should be able to sell some level of sponsorship against that, right? And that is, it's really confusing that can't happen. Yeah, and
I'll make that point even more emphatically, Monty. If people don't know, like, look, I'm sure for Koreans themselves, because all their connections are within Korea, they do an awesome job selling it in the Korean market. But if people don't know, the prime market to sell advertising in esports is fucking English language in America, UK, and maybe a little bit of Australia. That is like the number one easiest place to sell it. It's the reason why the Cloud9s of this world kill it in the sponsorship game and always have these huge sponsors and a massive deck. So the weirdest thing about that is it just shows that, like, even LCK essentially doesn't sort of care to figure out how to do this other thing that they need to do.
Yeah, and by the way, if you are a team in the LCS, this is terrible news. I don't want to hear, if I'm a team owner in the LCS, that the plan is to get more non-American viewership for the reasons you stated. You want as much US viewership as possible because it's the best to monetize.
You know, the joke is, by the logic of what Riot has done incentives-wise, Monty, if I'm actually Jack from Cloud9, it makes almost no sense to try and do more for my team because you're not, like you say, the viewers you're adding aren't even from my sponsor's region. If anything, I should just get my players and do a watch party for LCK and sell on that fucking stream. I could actually sell my region and make money off that. Like, that would actually be better incentive structure for us, as bad as that sounds.
It's crazy.
So just have Sven basically watch LCK when he's not doing LCS.
Yes. Yeah, you should have your players co-stream. That's actually a good point, and which is insanity, right? But this is why.
But yeah, go on.
This is why. Whatever. This is why
they don't all need to be commented on. Keep going.
This is why we complain about the misaligned incentives of the publishers and the developers and an actual esports product that makes money. Because in their brains, this is where the mask slips, right? In their brains, the only thing they care about is absolute viewership, right? And that doesn't actually help, as far as I can tell, because they have done such a bad job of selling absolute viewership. Like, why can't they sell, for example, if the LCK is just crushing it, why can't they go to Coca-Cola Global or McDonald's Global and get global marketing budget for total coverage across all their leagues and all their regions? They should be able to do that. Or do it for all of their leagues at the same time. It's very strange that they haven't been able to create a global sale yet, right? They have stuff for international tournaments and leagues, like they had State Farm for LCS and Worlds last year, for example, or they have MasterCard for their international events. But it really has, and like some of their regional leagues, but it's very weird that they haven't been able to close a big deal with a major global partner. Which would probably help alleviate some of these issues because you're trying to make a sale against multiple languages and multiple regions at once. Now, those deals are hard to do. I'm not saying that's easy, but given the fact that they've had, I don't know, a decade and are the biggest esport in the world, you would think that would have happened by now. So I don't know, man. I think this is really problematic, and I think it is crazy that they are looking at LCK as a guiding light. Because, again, either they don't understand why the LCK is what it is in terms of viewership, or they're dumb. And that's really because you're never going to turn it into LCK. But also, as I said, turning it into LCK doesn't solve the problems because you haven't solved those problems with LCK.
You've actually nailed this. Like, essentially, Travis could have invalidated the entire interview by just asking one question and demanding an actual answer to it. And the question goes, what possible reason would someone not from the LCS region have to watch the LCS? I guarantee you there's no answer they can give. There's nothing. They would have to unironically say something like they are a fan of TSM. Like, what else is there? Like, because it can't be the players better, the broadcast is more entertaining. Like, the hours are good. There's no, as you say, Marty, there is actually no reason that this hypothetical viewer will tune in. Especially if you actually really do want it to be Koreans and Chinese people, because as I've always said, my angle's the only chance you had for that, which is a long time ago. Some of them did for entertainment reasons care about a double lift or something like that, or maybe when G2 won MSI, they might have cared about G2 or something. But that was like a very brief window, and that was based around certain enormous star figures. Like beyond that, no one was mate. If fans don't know, those players used to lie in season 4, guys. They didn't really watch the LCS. Like, I've done those interviews literally with the dandies and the matters of the world, where when you turn the camera off and then you ask your translator, ask him, did he really watch LCS? They just say no. Or they say, I watched the odd game every now and then, or I saw Double Lift do a highlight or something. Like, no, nobody was watching the Western League of Legends ever. That was always a myth to me. It's why the real reason they went on and on and on in every interview about Bjergsen and Reckless is because they just always got to attend the international events, so that's how they knew them. They weren't watching Reckless play LEC, guys. No one was. Come on.
They literally didn't even know any of the other players.
No, of course not.
Just in my conversations with Korean players, the response was literal who a lot of the time, and the reason why they said Bjergsen was because he was the only player that they knew.
Yes,
that's how it is, guys. They spent zero time watching LCS. Sometimes they watch LEC because obviously G2 was quite good for a while.
What kills me though, bro, is the answer is obvious to me though, which is if I can't change anything else about like what makes the broadcast, the number one thing I would change is the format, mate. It's the immediate thing I'd start doing. Like my question would be, is there a way to make like a circuit or some kind of different approach? Like, do I need a different type of a competition? Do I need to make it just a bunch of short fun tournaments? Does it have to be one lock? I would be looking at that angle personally. I think that's the best way to reinvent it.
Yeah. I think they will change the format. Again, I've said this a lot on this show, but the only reason they didn't change the format this year was because they promised the owners that they wouldn't do it until next year. Even though I think many of the owners would have rather had the LEC format this year, and I think they will be making pretty big adjustments to the format next year. That's everything I've heard says that they will do that.
And also, here's another one for you, Monty. Like, obviously, I get the vibe because of how the Chinese and Korean systems are set up. You aren't ever going to get a Super League like you wanted. But why can't you have a Western Super League is my question.
Yes. Yeah.
That would be awesome. I mean, to me, by the way, I'm not even going to make it just Western Super League. I would make it all the Western shit. Like, I would make the two best CB LoL teams, plus, I don't know, the best team from the LAN arena, plus the the fucking, I don't know, top 40 LEC teams, plus the best 4 LCS, whatever the scenario. And then I would make a circuit and I'd have a bunch of different competitions. I think that immediately would make it more interesting to me.
I think what I've heard from some of the team owners is that they would like a combination, like the LEC and the LCS to merge into one larger league.
Because the level's at least close enough. You can have fun with that. Like the CB LoL team every now and then is going to upset like a top LEC team. That'd be awesome. Think of the trash talking, the rivalry. I think this is the way you bring it back, in my opinion.
Yeah, right, and you could kind of swap teams, like half the LEC teams could come to LCS, like LA, half of the LCS teams could go to Berlin. You play each other there for half a split, and then you kind of like change places. So you spend half the time at home, half the time away. That way you're not, traveling every week with jet lag. There's lots of ways logistically.
Remember, the good thing about European League of Legends is because you've got all those sturdy ERLs, people are going to be able to watch something anywhere. Like if you're a French fan, it doesn't matter if like Vitality goes to LCS. You just watch the LFL still, plus whatever games you watch of Vitality in the LCS. Like I think Europe is even the one that could survive sending these teams, mate.
Oh yeah, I don't think it'd be an issue. I think it'd be good for LEC viewership as well because it would be a hype new product.
Anything you can do that brings in the Brazilian viewership, that's just an instant win for everyone.
Sure, yeah. And I do think that having all Brazilian rosters in LCS would be extremely good. As I've said many times, like Immortals owns MIBR. Let them use the MIBR, rebrand to MIBR. They own it. Then allow them to just run a Brazilian roster. You will see Immortals be useful in terms of league viewership and hype and competitiveness rise immediately. That is a very quick fix, in my opinion. So, yeah, I think there are many things you could do, but I think it is crazy to say that, well, if we start doing, they mentioned, we wanted the Spanish LCS language, Spanish broadcast has been successful. I have no idea if that's true. They said they wanted to add Portuguese and other languages to LCS. But again, it just kind of misses the point because if you're a Portuguese speaking Brazilian person, you probably just care about CB LoL because again, you're not watching LCS because it has Brazilian people in it and you want to cheer for your countrymen. It's not more competitive. Like, if you want competitive League of Legends, you just go to Asian League of Legends. And if you want to cheer for people from your country, you'll just go to your country's league, whether that's LFL or CB LOL. So I don't understand why adding languages is going to help LCS's viewership get out of this spiral. And even if it did, it doesn't help the monetization problems of the teams. It just helps Riot have more reach for marketing, right? So it's very confusing because it's not like when Riot goes to sponsors, the sponsors say, give us the geolocation breakdown of your viewership. And then they do. And they will see what percentage of that audience is American and spend accordingly, right? What they need to do is pump the American audience. And they did touch on it a little bit by saying that they think that they're trying to reach people who formerly watched the LCS, because obviously there are a lot of those people because it used to have 400,000 concurrent viewers for regular season matches. They're trying to reach those people and try and bring them back into the fold. But honestly, the problem with League of Legends as an esport is because it changes so drastically every year. If you don't keep playing and you've been out of the game for 3 or 4 years, it's basically an entirely new game, and there's new champions, new items. It's very difficult to understand. And if people have just aged out and they haven't been replaced by younger players or new players to the game, which they haven't because of their failures within the high school circuit in particular, which we've blamed on like Play Versus in the past. You know, young people in America just aren't playing League of Legends. It's not like it is in Korea where new blood comes into the game all the time. And that's a systemic failure on Riot's part in this region that can't really be undone. So I don't know how you bring in these people who maybe just don't play the game anymore. It's a very weird problem. And I just don't think it's a solvable one. And their ideas about the solution, even to say the things that they said, I think is ridiculous. It's completely ridiculous.
The problem, I think, is this. You've got two quite unique issues here. So one is, this isn't even something that was always the case, but as is a general rule being the case, the product is just shit. The actual games in LCS are not good games of League of Legends. Nope. You know, when people do that stupid thing they always did, Monty, where they were like, it's just because you have a bias. No, you cannot gaslight me. I have watched 10 years of this shit. The LCK, it's worse now, guys. The gap has only gotten bigger. Like, the gap now might be LCK might be 15 times better to watch than the LCS. And the LCK isn't even as good as the LPL, by the way, but it's way better. It's so significantly better. And then the second problem you have is, in my opinion, the most unique problem in esports history, which is the main region of the company Riot Games is America, but America, only by their bullshit system, is even the fourth best region, Monty. If you actually had to rank the teams in the entire world of League of Legends 1 to X, like, the LCS teams would be like number 100 on the list. Like, it's actually absurd how bad they are. And then we're asking for real. Like, this is the only comparison I can even give here, Monty, is insane woke shit. And the reason I say insane is stuff where the premise doesn't make sense. So, you know, when someone comes to you and goes, how do we get women's tennis to make as much as the men's? It's like, I can't even process the premise. Like, holy shit. To even unpack that is blowing my mind, because you've made 10 assumptions in the question that no one's ever been able to establish. Like what you're asking me there is for real to just create a miracle alternate reality. So in the same scenario, what I would do is, again, this is why, by the way, Riot doesn't do real interviews, because in a real interview, some real motherfucker like me or Richard Lewis rocks up and goes, but how would the region that has the 100th best team in ever be comparable to the best region? And you'd even say, to even give them a lifeline, just to take it away from them again, you'd go, do you know any sports examples of when this is happening? They wouldn't have anything, by the way, guys. They wouldn't have. That's why when we did that Four Horsemen episode, people like Philip Aram loosely would touch on things like European soccer and the English Premier League, but they never had any concrete example, you know, oh, and look, this team here did this, because that's the problem. There's no past precedent of this. Like I said, I can't think of an example like this, Monty. When was there ever an esport where the main region we're all obsessed with making have viewership is one that has all the shit teams in? What? Bro, could you imagine in Counter-Strike if we had to endlessly figure out, but how do we get people to watch Counter-Strike in Southeast Asia? Who gives a shit? Just don't. Just watch European, and you fucking idiot. So basically what you're saying is, instead of why don't we all watch the really good shit, you're going, how do we mind fuck people to only care about the bad shit? Not only do I not know, I almost don't want to know. This is like some Lovecraftian shit. Like, I feel like to know what you want me to know would destroy my whole reality. Like, I can't handle this. Do I have to like buckle in to do these episodes? Like, right, come on, let's heads together. Let's figure out how to make LCS good again.
Look, I've said it a million times.
LCS better by pressing the X in the right hand corner of the screen.
Exactly.
That's what I do, mate.
Well, that's where everybody is, right? And you're trying to figure out how to not press the X button, and this is why the commissioner job is just so terrible for the LCS, and it's going to be some sucker who takes this position because there's no fixing the problem. And especially because they won't even go back to do, and part of this interview too was equally hilarious because Travis does, I think, grill them a lot about the shift to weekdays and the timing issues that happen within the league. And the questions were, are you thinking about switching back to weekends? No, because VCT is there, of course, now, because they put VCT there. And so
they're still treating us like, mate, Monty, it was bad enough when we were supposed to watch a whole day of shit BO1s. You're now supposed to also consume a whole separate esport simultaneously. The worst thing about Riot will always be this, Monty, and you know this, but other people don't get this. They don't just paint themselves into a corner, Monty. They will actively say, here we are, painting ourselves into a corner, and then everyone who knows something will go, whoa, 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 if you keep doing that, you're going to be painted into a corner at some point. You'll have no choice left to do the thing that no one wants. Yes, but now I'm in the corner, though, so what can I do? I guess I'll just have to do that thing no one wants. If people don't know, this is going on right now in Valorant, where they've basically done the same thing. It's like they've set themselves up into trouble, and then they're like, well, now that there's nothing left to do, we'll just make a bad decision. Like, what? Have you noticed how Riot never actually addressed their assumptions, mate? They never unpack their initial assumption. Like, the first assumption there that they are putting forwards, Monty, when they say that, is that it's totally logical that a fan of the LCS also watches VCT Americas in Valorant. I don't see the connection myself. I don't even see the connection if they made the game, mate. It's like, what would they connect? So what? So what? Why would Riot Games be involved? I mean, I watch Valorant as well now. Like, I feel like you're just making extra problems for yourselves, guys. Just figure out the league part. Don't worry about Valorant. In fact, if anything, let Valorant be its own thing. It seems like it's doing well.
To see more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content, well, subscribe to this channel then, or, be a pleb and don't.